Good afternoon. This is Don Setti from CYBRI in New York City. Welcome. I'm joined here with my colleague, Paul Cobbler. Paul, how's it going today?
It's not bad, Don.
Excellent. So what we're doing here today is we're starting a series, Introduction to Penetration Testing for small and medium businesses. It might be a first time for a company thinking about a pen test, or maybe you have a level of maturity with this as well. The first segment that we're going to talk about today is what is a pen test? Why is it important? This is segment one, and we're going to cover some regulatory requirements and the different types of pen testing that small and medium business might want to consider. A little brief background on CYBRI. We are a cybersecurity and information security solution and service provider based out of New York City. We help companies detect critical vulnerabilities through penetration testing, providing virtual CISO services, as well as red team ethical hacking. We are a graduate of Secure Tech through Dream It Ventures in New York City. And Paul, maybe you could share a little bit about your background before we jump in.
Yeah, so, I am currently the head of the red team at CYBRI, and, my job is to really ensure that the pen tests run smoothly, that we're getting the right talent coming in and sort of helping, clients with the technical delivery of everything. My background originally was in network and infrastructure. I had worked previously with Boeing and in other financial services companies, and then sort of transitioned into incident response and then into sort of purple team. And now I'm just pure red team. So that's kind of the background on me real quick. So
excellent. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that, Paul. So why don't we get into a little bit about, if we're talking with a small and medium business who may have not done pen testing before, or maybe another type of company that's a little bit more mature on that curve. High level, what is penetration testing, Paul, and why is it important overall?
Yeah, so basically penetration testing is to simulate as if you were going to be hacked by someone who is malicious, but in this case, you're contracting them to avoid sort of, having that hack happen. So, I think a big misnomer is that vulnerability scanning and penetration testing tend to be overlapped in terms of what a lot of companies do. And they're quite distinct because even though a pen test might include a vulnerability scan, it's really there to go above and beyond it. So a pen test will also find misconfigurations, weaknesses, and the pen tester is going to sort of leverage the knowledge that they have in order to exploit things and sort of move around. So it's not just saying, there's a vulnerability here, there's a vulnerability there. It's going to say, well, if I take these two vulnerabilities, I can get to this part where I can leverage this and sort of create a story behind it as if there was a real hack going on. And that way you can kind of correct things in a more comprehensive way.
Great. And maybe you could touch on, I know that there's a lot of talk out there about automated pen testing and then manual pen testing. You have any perspective on how those two kind of work together or don't work together?
Yeah, I mean, automated pen testing is a relatively new thing going beyond some of the tools that have been around for a while. And it's still rather new. And so there are some good things out there, and it really does help take the legwork off of a pen test, but you still, at least probably for the next decade are going to need someone who knows what they're doing, understands the technology, and can kind of work with that again to chain things together in a way that maybe, right now the AI isn't sure because, I think the big thing as a pen tester, you'll go onto a site and you'll see, they have, 8,000 different assets and they're going to be all these different versions of things. And there's just so much variation that, I'll go on to, a site, and every time I do a test, I see a new object, a new vulnerability, and I have to learn how to work with it. And it's just something where, I can understand it. I can understand the precautions, and sort of right now AI isn't ready for that because especially, as pen testers, we have to be both up to date in technology, but, I'll see technology as old as 30 years old deployed. So
it's about the people who are conducting the test.
Yeah.
Part of it. Great. From a regulatory standpoint, there are many businesses that fall under third-party risk management frameworks because they're vendors of larger organizations. companies that are providing, some sort of healthcare service or medical type of services might fall under certain reg requirements, and certainly for financial services. Maybe you can touch on some of those type of, regulatory requirements and why companies need to, adhere to those things, whether it's, for healthcare, financial services, or e-commerce.
Yeah, I think one of the main things here is to understand that there are requirements. So, for example, SOC 2 and PCI DSS do require that you have a third party conduct the pen test, and that's just to ensure that you have someone who both is new to your organization, and they're not having the blindness of having seen something every day, but also giving a fair assessment where their name relies on these tests. In addition, there are other requirements that don't really specifically point to it, but there's like, for example, HIPAA doesn't really state that you need a pen test, but pretty much everyone who falls under it gets it, because at the end of the day, the pen test is there to help ensure that your security is there. And that, that's the big thing, because when you have a HIPAA breach and there's a lot of records being leaked, that's a huge problem. So the pen test is more proactive, even though it's not required. So that's kind of what's going on.
Great. That's awesome. And I've seen that also, like, e-commerce with, companies that have a certain threshold of transactions, different types of, I guess, PCI level of testing that's going on. So that's something that we're obviously familiar with from that perspective. Maybe you could touch on this type of test for a company that might, be thinking about doing this.
Yeah. So, pen testing can really be anything that exists, and while right now, uh, we're pretty much focused on application pen testing and sort of the complexity of that, as well as the traditional network infrastructure. We also do dive into, other things such as cloud pen test, which is a mix of things. Typically there's an application running, there is a network and infrastructure. It's just work in a different way. There's mobile pen testing, which really falls under application pen testing. You can get into IoT pen testing, which is always a growing field, and there's plenty of people out there who can do that. And you can even do physical pen testing. So often, if we do go on site, we might just have a quick assessment of the physical security. There's some fun things you can do there. So you can really get into everything. But when people talk about pen testing, they're mostly referring to those first two things: the application pen test and the network and infrastructure pen test.
That's great. Thanks, Paul. I appreciate that. So to our audience listening, we appreciate your time today with us. And again, this was segment one, which we're focusing pretty much on, who, what, where, when, and why. And in follow-up segments, we're going to deep dive. So the next segment is going to be a deep dive into application penetration testing. So we look forward to seeing you, and thank you, and have a great day. Paul, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Don.